All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final session of the day of Data Camp Radar on scaling data quality in the age of generative AI. We left the best for last, so everyone do give us a lot of love in the emojis, as you can see here below, and let us know where you're joining from. I see more than 500 people in the session already, so yeah, do let us know where you're joining from, especially, and what you thought of Data Camp Radar Day 1 and what you're excited about Data Camp Radar Day 2. So, of course, as organizations continue to embrace AI and machine learning, the importance of maintaining high-quality data has never been more critical. And there are arguably no better people in the data business across the board than Barr Moses, Prukalpa Sankar, and George Fraser to come talk to us about data quality. So first, I'm going to introduce Barr Moses. She's the CEO and co-founder of Monte Carlo, a pioneering company in data reliability and the creator of the data observability category. Monte Carlo is backed by top VCs such as Accel, GGV, Redpoint, ICONIQ Growth, Salesforce Ventures, and IVP. Barr, it's great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Next up is Prukalpa Sankar. She is the founder of Atlan. Prukalpa is a leading modern data and AI governance company on a mission to enable better collaboration around data between business people, analysts, and engineers. She has been awarded the Economic Times Emerging Entrepreneur of the Year, Forbes 30 Under 30, 40 Under 40, and the top 10 CNBC Young Businesswoman of 2016. Prukalpa, it's great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And last but not least is George Fraser, CEO at Fivetran. George founded Fivetran to help data engineers simplify the process of working with disparate data sources. He has grown Fivetran to be the de facto standard platform for data movement. In 2023, he was named a Datanami Person to Watch. He also has a PhD in neurobiology. George, great to see you.
Great to be with you.
And just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. There will be time for Q&A at the end, so make sure to ask questions by using the Q&A feature and vote for your favorite questions. If you want to chat with the other participants, use the chat feature. We highly encourage you to engage in the conversation. If you want to network and add folks on LinkedIn and share your LinkedIn profile, they will be removed automatically, but do join our LinkedIn profile that is linked in the chat as well, and you can connect with fellow attendees. And I think this is a great starting point to start today's session. It's safe to say that data quality is at the top of mind of many data leaders today, especially with the generative AI boom that we see. But maybe to set the stage, how would you describe the current state of data quality within the industry, within organizations today? And what do you think are the common challenges organizations are facing when it comes to maintaining high quality data? Barr, I'll actually start with you.
Sure. I have lots of opinions on this topic. Try not to hog the entire time. Yes, data quality. Well, frankly, let me start by saying it has been a problem and an issue in the space for the last couple of decades. So nothing is new, right? We've been complaining about data quality for a long time. We shall continue to complain about the quality of our data for a long time. However, I do think a few things have changed. First and foremost, obviously, with generative AI products, being more or being prevalent, at least in terms of the desire to build them. Data teams are put under a lot of pressure. We actually put out a survey that showed, we surveyed sort of a bunch of data leaders, and 100% of data leaders were cited as under pressure to deliver generative AI products. No one said they are not being asked to build something. However, only 70% of them, just under 68% of them, actually feel like their data is ready for generative AI. So that means that while there's a ton of pressure from C-level and board and others in the market to actually build generative AI, no one, or the large majority of people, don't think that their data is ready for that. And I think that poses a good question for us as an industry to figure out why that is the case. And my hypothesis is that what I would call the data estate has changed a lot in the last 5 to 10 years. So the way in which we process, transform, store data has changed a ton. But the way in which we manage data hasn't changed at all. And so that means that, if you go back to the survey, actually 50% of those data leaders still use manual sort of approaches to data quality. And so while we've become a lot more sophisticated with what we demand from our data and from our data infrastructure, we have not become more sophisticated in how we manage data quality. I think manual rules will and always be important, but they're not the end-all be-all. In fact, it is just the starting point. And so I think this, in short, if I had to respond to what is the state of data quality today, I think there are new problems. It's sort of an old problem with new challenges that we have not caught up yet. I definitely have ideas on how we need to solve that, but I'll pause that. I'll pause there for a minute and see if any reactions from my esteemed fellow panelists.
Prukalpa, I'll let you react here.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Barr said, but I think one thing to abstract this a little bit over, I think about this concept of data trust more than just data quality, or and maybe this is the reason you have the three of us in this panel, but the way I think about this is if you think about that final layer of trust, and you have a human who says, this number on this dashboard is broken, oh my God, or it doesn't look right, what's wrong, right? It sounds like a very simple question. It's actually a very difficult question to answer, because the reason a number could be off could be because the Fivetran pipeline that day broke and didn't run. It could be because
that never happens, Prukalpa. What are you talking about?
or the orchestra failed, right? Or it could be because the data quality checks that day failed. It could be because someone changed the way we measure annual recurring revenue, and no one remembered to update the data consumer, right? And so if you think about this flow, I almost think of it as you have data producers who actually kind of want to guarantee trustworthy self-service data. No data producer wants to spend their time answering the question of why a number is off. And on the other hand, you have data consumers who actually want to use data. No one actually cares about the quality of the data. They actually just want to use the business. A data consumer cares about making business decisions. And in the middle, we have this gap. And the reason we have this gap is because we have it's almost self-created problems. We have created a significant number of tools that have scaled massively, but we have a proliferation of tools. We also have significant diversity in people. So any single final dashboard probably had 5 people touch it. This problem just gets worse in the AI era. So at least if I was a human, I look at the number and I'm like, oh, maybe the number doesn't look right and I can do something about it. If I'm AI, I don't do that, and that can actually lead to pretty significant decisions. So I think the way we think about this, and we sit on that layer between the producers and the consumers and bringing this stack together, is what does it mean to create these data products finally? What makes something reusable and trustworthy, and how can you bring context across from the pipeline, from data quality, from all of these layers in the stack, human context, to solve the trust problem or the gap.
Okay, that's really great. And George, I'll let you react to both Barr and Prukalpa.
Prukalpa's framework is right, that there's a lot of layers to the system, and it matters a lot where the problem is arising, except the part about Fivetran breaking. No, but I mean, we try very hard to avoid contributing to the data quality problem in our layer. You would not believe the amount of effort that goes on behind the scenes to try to chase down the long tail of replication out of sync bugs that can happen with all the systems we support. We are not perfect. I can only say that we are better than everyone else. Yeah. So I think where it happens is very important in terms of troubleshooting. You asked why, despite all the efforts in this, is this still so top of mind? And the answer is because it's impossible to fix. Data quality is not a problem you can ever fix. There are so many layers, and there are so many ways for things to go wrong. And sometimes the source of some of the later stage problems that Prukalpa was just talking about are things like you can't actually 100% know whether the person who checked out at your point of sale system was actually the same person who created an account on your website. So you can never actually get to 100% with data quality. You just have to manage it, and you have to identify what are the highest priority areas, where is it most important that the numbers be right, prioritize those, work on those. But I think you've got to start out acknowledging it will never be perfect.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think the thing on that is kind of what you said, right? That I think things will always, the reality of running, especially real-time dynamic data ecosystems, is that things will always break. It's likely that there will always be things that are, because that like it's just the nature of the beast.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I think a lot about like when you think about trust doesn't actually break because something went wrong. Trust breaks because someone told you, your stakeholder told you that something went wrong without you telling them, actually something went wrong today. Maybe you should like, and I think that's the element of trust, which is it's one layer above something. And I don't think the solution is trying to make sure nothing ever goes wrong. The solution is how do you go one level above and make sure that you solve for trust, and then how do you measure and manage it over time.
Yeah,
I think
trust is a
Continue.
good word. It is very hard to win and very easy to lose. An example of this I heard a long time ago. It's funny. I'm in New York right now, and I met with somebody earlier today at Bloomberg. Actually, I still have the iced coffee that I got while I was there. And long time ago, I don't know if you know what Bloomberg is, but they do data feeds for finance. It's a kind of data management, but it's data that like stock prices, commodity prices, gas prices, things like that. Many years ago, when Fivetran first started, one of the things I learned is a key element of their business is that it is accurate even in this obscure case. The price of beans in Korea or whatever it is, like even the most obscure data feeds, they are more accurate than anybody else. And that is really important because if one thing is wrong one day out of the year, that is a huge problem. That's something we've always tried to emulate at Fivetran in a very different context, replicating a company's own data. But it speaks to how it is when you're in any kind of data business, you can be the difference between 0 errors and 1 error is bigger than the difference between 1 error and infinity. Trust is so hard to win and so quickly lost.
And Barr, I'll let you react, and then I'll ask my next question.
Oh, I was just going to say, just reflecting on this, like I wouldn't be surprised if we would be sitting in a panel like in 10 years from now, still having, sort of similar discussions, except the words change and definition change. So maybe we call it, trust or data quality or whatever now, like hallucinations in the context of generative AI, right? But the problem remains the same. I think one of the sort of interesting questions to answer is like what are our, customers who are now faced with, what are the challenges that our customers today are faced with, and how are they dealing with that, and how is that different from a few years ago, or honestly just like a year ago? And the reality is like these problems are just not going away, and so it's figuring out how to address those, in a way that adapts to where our customers are and meeting them where they are is I think super important.
And I want to pick up on that point because, Barr, you alluded to meeting in a panel in 10 years. I'd be very excited to have a DataCamp Radar AI edition 2034 where we discuss this. And what it seems to me is that the goalpost on data quality is shifting every year, right? So like organizations make strides, they make investments, but then the ambitions of what it means to have like high quality data also shift with that. So the challenges also still remain the same. So you mentioned this, Barr, earlier in the discussion, is that same problems, different challenges. What are those challenges today? So I'd love to learn that from you.
Yeah, great question. And I mean, I'll start by saying, look, like if, you could, in some world, like if model output is wrong, or, you sort of, you're prompting with a question and the answer is wrong. Is it better to not have an answer at all? Like, is no data better than bad data? Maybe, I think so. But also then what's the point of having, kind of a Q&A or a chatbot if it can't provide you an answer at all, right? And so like, to your question, the definition of good, what does good look like, actually becomes tricky. And how do you define like what should we strive for changes, I think. But to your particular question, like what are the challenges or kind of pinpointing those? I think kind of how I alluded to sort of how the data state has changed over time. I think historically what we've done, when it comes to sort of trust, to Prukalpa's point, was really start with, can we figure out about data issues before anyone else downstream learns about it, right? Whether that's in generative AI or not, whether it could be in a dashboard. And so the thought is that if we can catch issues before others downstream do, we can sort of either repair that trust or rebuild that trust. I think what we're seeing right now is that the challenge, that is definitely a very important challenge to address. And I think detection capabilities have evolved to a certain degree. I sort of talked about manual solutions for that versus not. I think sort of the big kind of like next leap here for building, data quality, data trust, whatever you want to call it, is sort of going beyond detection and taking the next step of sort of understanding how do you actually resolve, how do you actually address these problems. And when you think about the root cause of these challenges, that has changed too. And so in the past, most teams really just focus on sort of cleansing the data. And once you cleanse the data and it was fine, you brought it in, you're all good. Fivetran never breaks, so you were okay. And in today's world, Fivetran still doesn't break. Sorry, George, I'm picking on you. But but the data sort of, if you look at the data landscape, it's become really complex. It's like super, super complex even for a small team to manage, right? And I think if you think about sort of the core pillars of what makes up the kind of like data state, I would call it, there's three things. The first is the data itself. So actually like the data sources, whatever, kind of you're ingesting. The second is the code. So, code written by engineers, machine learning engineers, data scientists, analytics engineers, et cetera. And then the third component is the systems or the infrastructure, basically the jobs running all of that. And so you have multiple teams building multiple complex webs of all three of those things. The problem is that data can break as a result of each one of those three. So it could be as a result of the data, just that you ingested being totally incorrect. It could be the result of, bad code. Bad code could be like a bad join or a schema change, or it could be a system failure. I won't name names, but systems do fail, right? It could be any general ELT solution they use. And so actually like understanding that in order to really build reliable products, you have to look at and understand each of those components. You first of all have to have an overview and sort of visibility in each of these components, and then also understand, can you correlate between a particular data issue that you're experiencing and say a code change or an infrastructure change or anything like that. That is really, really hard to do today. And so what ends up happening is that data teams are inundated with lots of, alerts or kind of, data quality detections, data quality issues. And they're all flying around between, 20 to 30 different data teams and 10 different domains, and go figure like who needs to address which problem. Or which alert. So you actually down to like the brass tacks of how do we handle this. Those are some of the challenges that I think really sort of figuring out. How do we both have really strong detection of issues, but then how do we go to the next step and actually figure out what is the root cause? And honestly, oftentimes it's more than just one root cause. So it's typically, this shitstorm, excuse my language, with like every single thing breaking, right? Like it'll be both a data, a code, and a system issue. And so, when I think about how our systems can get more sophisticated or how we build more reliable data systems, it has to have a more sophisticated view of what's actually, what are the, various components of that and what could break.
That's really great. And maybe, George, from your perspective, adding on top of what Barr said, what are the challenges that you're seeing today when it comes to scaling data quality or moving the needle on data quality?
Well, I mean, we look at a very particular slice of this. We look at the replication piece. Does the data in the central data warehouse match the data in the systems of record, be it a database like Postgres or Oracle or a app like Salesforce or Workday? And we've come a long way with just centralization of effort, just the fact that Fivetran pipelines are standard, so everyone is running the same code. There's this cumulative thing where over years we fix bugs. That's the main tactic at the end of the day that we use to identify and squash data integrity issues. We are experimenting with some new ideas to try to get that last little bit. That last 0.1% is very hard. They include the most exciting idea right now is the idea of doing direct sampling for validation. So, from when you're in the business of replication, data quality can be seen as you basically just need another sync mechanism that you can use to compare against. We've done a few iterations internally. We've shipped things, and these are all running in the background. These are not things you see as a Fivetran customer. And where basically we pull samples of data from the source or the destination and compare them to just create a totally out-of-band mechanism to verify. And we've discovered, for example, we discovered a floating point truncation bug when we write CSV files for loading into data warehouses by doing this. And we think there are more things out there that we could discover and fix by doing that. And then the other side of this is at some point we want to make these capabilities customer facing, because there's a lot of phantom data integrity issues in our world. We get a lot of reports from customers where they're like, oh, Fivetran is broken, the system doesn't match. And sometimes they are right. We do occasionally have bugs, but a lot of the time there's something wrong with the comparison that they're doing. And that doesn't mean that we just tell them to go away. We have to figure it out. We have to verify that it's like a false alarm. So we get a lot of false alarms at Fivetran, so to the extent that we can build tools for quickly proving or disproving the concern. We're thinking about that too.
That's awesome. And then Prukalpa, from your side of the data quality island, what are the challenges that you're seeing today?
Yeah, so the way I think about it is I think of it as a 3-step framework. It's actually very similar to health, I think, like generally, like life health. It's awareness. That's the first step. The second step is cure. And the third step is prevention. And I think if you think about each of these steps, like awareness, for example, what we're seeing with customers is we have a ton of customers who use us with Fivetran Monte Carlo. And I think, like, for example, Fivetran, we were like the metadata API that came out. Now we have customers that say, let's pull out context on what's happening and send out an announcement directly to my end users, which is red, green, yellow. Did the pipeline run or did it not run? Did it run as I expected? Stuff like that. We have the same thing with anomaly detection so the stuff that the data producers know, can we share awareness to end consumers and end users, and in a way that's easy for them. It's in their BI tool, it's in Slack, it's this like green announcement that says red, green, yellow, right? Like stuff like that. That's first step. Can we create awareness of where we are? The one big change we've seen is this move to this concept of a data product, where I think some of the most furthest ahead teams are actually taking all these metrics and metadata and converting it almost into a score, which is a data product score. And says, let's create a measure of if you don't measure, you can't really improve. What's the measure of reusability and trust as I think about a data product? So that's been, I've been super surprised by how quickly that adoption has grown across our customers. The second on cure, Barr alluded to this, collaboration. I think that's the most broken flow that exists right now, because cure is a solution between business and data producers. Both need to come together. So there's a mass, there I think we have a lot of work to do. When we come back, maybe not in 10 years, we come back in even a year, we've made significant progress in collaboration. And the third is prevention. I think the biggest piece here, we're seeing a lot of adoption around data contracts and preventing. So how do you take what you learned in awareness and cure it, but also make it something that's more sustainable over time? And I think that's actually where there's been a bunch of innovation. I think we launched a module, but there's been a ton of innovation over the last some time. And hopefully all those three things together actually get us to a point where we solve for data trust. I really hope, my vision for this is in a few years, it becomes a really boring problem. We're not talking about it. It's it's there. And then we keep improving it, but it's not a problem that we should have a topic of conversation about. It should become table stakes.
Prukalpa, what do you mean by data contracts?
So the simplest way of this is, how do you help a producer and a consumer align on an SLA? That's the best way that we're thinking. And so what do you believe are the core rules for data quality? Again, it's a little bit more of a collaboration problem, actually, more than it's a technical problem, which is what do we agree on is our core layers of this is what we believe, and then how do you translate that into the actual data producer workflow itself? That's the best example of what we're seeing customers turn this into.
And there's one thing that you mentioned, Prukalpa, which is on the collaboration side, that I think is very important, which is that data quality is often a cultural issue as much as it is, broken pipelines or something happening on the data collection side. Can you walk us through maybe the main cultural issues that lead to poor data quality, like, and expand on that notion a bit more? And like, what can happen on what can organizations do today to shift their culture to prioritize data quality? So I'll let you lead with that, Prukalpa, and then I'd love to listen from the remaining panelists.
Yeah. See, with every cultural thing, right? I actually think of it similar. Like, what's the base of culture? Like, first, if you believe in good intent, which I would like to believe that everyone actually is trying to do the right thing for the company to a large extent.
No one's trying to destroy data pipelines.
No one's trying to no data producer wants to ship something that breaks and then spend time. Nobody wants to do it. Let's start. Everyone wants good intent. So I think the first step is really, I think, just shared awareness and shared context. So first, a lack of, I remember this. I remember once I used to be a data leader in my previous time, and I got this call from a stakeholder, and they were like, number of this dashboard doesn't look right. I remember jumping on my bed, and I look at my dashboard, and there's a 2x spike overnight, and I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. And even I, in that moment, had a question on oh my God, did something break, or is my data engineer not doing his job? I had that. Because I couldn't just open up Airflow and look at the audit logs and see what happened. I just couldn't. So first step, the reality is there are 5 different people with their own DNAs, and they don't fully understand each other's work. Unlike any other team, sales teams are very homogeneous. Data is not. It's very heterogeneous. So first, how do you create shared context, shared understanding, awareness across the ecosystem in a way that everyone can understand? Second, can you measure it? Which is why I'm super excited, because if you create a measure, then it becomes very easy for people to move towards. So I think as you think about, so how do you measure it is the second. And then the third is actually then just the process flows. It's tooling, process flows, iterative improvement. That's actually the easy part of the problem in my mind. I think the first 2 things, for example, even shared context, George said this, right? It's very easy to lose trust. But at that time, nobody says 99.5% of the time it was accurate. You see the one time the number was broken and it breaks trust, right? And so then what's the shared understanding? What are we defining as trust? And how do you solve that human problem? I think the best examples of this is we've seen people actually have folks who understand both culture and humans and data drive the charge on building that initial, people call it governance standards, whatever you decide to call it. But that initial shared context and understanding is, I think, the first step to good culture.
Yeah, and I'll let you react to that. Maybe what are some of the levers that you've seen that can improve on cultural level to improve data quality within an organization? Maybe kind of getting inspired from Fivetran customers here.
Oh my gosh, I'll let you know when I find one. Unfortunately, a lot of data quality problems have origins in poor systems configuration, and those things are really hard to fix. If I have one piece of advice for early stage founders, it is keep an eye on your Salesforce configuration, because if that thing gets out of joint, man, it is hard to fix. So it is a real grind trying to make progress on this. A lot of it consists of going upstream to the systems of record and improving their configuration so that they're not generating a zillion duplicate accounts and stuff like that.
Yeah, I can attest to that. And then, Barr, from your perspective, culturally, maybe, how do you move the needle as a data leader?
Yeah, I mean, agree with what Prukalpa and George said. Maybe the perspective that I can add here, I think the companies that we are seeing make progress, it's due to a few reasons. The first is there's both this organizational top-down and bottom-up agreement that data matters and that the quality and trust of that data matter. If it's just one direction, that typically fails. So if there's, there's a CEO of one of the, Fortune 500 banks gets upset every time they get a report with bad data. And so they actually made it a C-level initiative to make sure their data is sort of, ready, clean to the best degree that they can, et cetera. That obviously creates some pressure, creates, real initiatives in the business, real metrics, to Prukalpa's point earlier. That is not sufficient. It's very important, but the, sort of business teams, if you will, business analysts, but also the data governance teams, in large enterprises. There's various, it could be the centralized data engineering platform. All those people need, all the different teams and are all stakeholders in an initiative and need to care about it just as much. For those teams, oftentimes the motivation is that they're spending most of their days in fire drills on data issues. And by the way, I saw someone sort of asking, can we clarify what is a data issue? I think that's a great question. Bad data can look in various forms and has, its symptoms are so different. But generally, the way that I'm thinking about this is if you look at some data product, whatever data product that is, again, it could be pricing recommendation, it could be, a dashboard that your CMO is looking at. It could be a chatbot. And if you're looking at it, you look at the data and it's very clear to you that the answer is wrong. Maybe the most, an example from the last few weeks was from Google. I think someone searched, how do I keep my cheese on my pizza or something like that? And Google recommended you can use organic super glue. That's a great way to keep your cheese.
That's like a generative search from Reddit.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's right. And so that is a good example of bad data. That is one, very public, and I think it went viral, and maybe Google can get away with that, but many other companies can't get away with that. So there was, an airline that actually provided the wrong discount on an airline ticket, and so a consumer purchased a ticket at a different price and actually sued that airline and got the money back, recouped the money, and so there are real repercussions to putting bad data out there. And I think, going back to your question about culture, I think, both the teams working with data have to care about that. Now, the thing is that they don't always do, because they don't always understand where is your data going. So if I'm building a data pipeline, I don't necessarily understand who's using that data and why, which makes sense if I'm way upstream. And so oftentimes I find that the companies who have made the most progress are those who are able to bring together those teams under a unified view of where we want to go as a company. Oftentimes that can start looking at just how many data incidents do we have? How quick are we to respond? Like, what's our time to detection of those? What's our time to resolution? And then, taking this a step further, oftentimes our teams putting together SLAs between each other. So, the SLA for particular data to arrive on time or to arrive in some complete state, et cetera. So I would say kind of the focus on metrics. I agree with Prukalpa that typically drives the right behavior, or drives some behavior, which is better than none.
Okay, I couldn't agree more. And then maybe you mentioned something
on metrics will drive some behavior. I agree with that.
I'm gonna get that tattooed. And then the one thing that you mentioned, Barr, is the Google example, right? Because I think this kind of is a perfect segue into the nuances of data quality when it comes to generative AI, right? You mentioned that survey at the beginning of 100%. Exactly 100% of data leaders are under pressure to deliver generative AI use cases, right? That does not sound surprising at all. So, if you're a data leader, if you're in an organization trying to build a generative AI use case, what are the data quality considerations you need to have? Are they different from the general data quality considerations you need to have? Like, what are the nuances that you need to have? What are the nuances when it comes to the considerations of data quality when it comes to generative AI? So, Barr, I'll let you continue on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, if I think about sort of the state of generative AI with enterprises today, I mentioned from the survey, 100% are under pressure. By the way, 91% are actually building something. So we've almost all of us have succumbed to the pressure for whatever reason. And I think when we say we're building with generative AI, that can take various definitions. So I'll give you an example. Just last week, I spoke to one enterprise customer who told me we have the full entire sort of like tech stack for generative AI built, with all best in class. We're fully ready to go. We have no, use cases, or we don't really know. We don't have anything that's like tied to a business outcome that we can point to. But the tech stack is ready. Like, we're ready to go. Mm-hmm. And then another customer that said, we have, 300 or so business use cases laid out. We have like some great ideas for how to drive business outcome. We have nothing on the tech stack. We're totally, we don't even know where to get started. And I think that represents a spectrum of where customers are at. it can be anywhere on one versus the other side or in the middle. I think there's more questions than answers at this point. A lot of people are experimenting or sort of in the early days of building things in pilots. Some of it is also in production, but I think early days. I think by and large, across all of these instances, companies understand that they have to make sure that the data that's actually serving those LLMs has to be accurate. And here's why. Today, everyone has access to the best models. The models being built by 5,000 PhDs and $1 billion in GPUs, we can all access them. There's no competitive advantage for a company with them. Where does a competitive advantage lie? It's actually with the proprietary data that you can bring. That could be, via RAG or fine-tuning, whatever method you choose, but it's your proprietary data that will help differentiate your generative AI product so that you can create personalized experience for your customer or so that you can automate your own business process. But without that proprietary data, there's not really a moat or sort of competitive advantage. And so companies are realizing that they need to get their proprietary data in strong shape. And so that means making sure that is high quality data. And so we are seeing more and more companies thinking about how do we get ready so that when the time comes and we actually have the tech stack and the business use case and everything, and we can actually deliver on that, we have the right data and we can actually use it.
That's great. I couldn't agree more. And then George, I'll let you react to that as well.
I like the comment about the models. Everyone has access to the models, and the access for differentiation is what data you put into them. I have actually heard consultants advise companies that because everyone has access to the public models, there's the way you need to differentiate is by making your own model, which is insane advice. That will differentiate you. It will differentiate you because your model will be much worse than everyone. But it's so early days. It's hard to speculate about this. I mean, all of the AI stuff is so embryonic. It's very exciting because it's giving us the ability to do something with the unstructured tech data that we've had it for years, but it's giving us the ability to interact with unstructured text in a meaningful but programmatic way. What that turns into, time will tell. I don't know if RAG is going to be the be-all, end-all. I question whether chat is even the right long-term interface for a lot of these internal applications. But I don't have a great alternative on the tip of my tongue. So I think it's very early days, and everyone should have their eyes and ears open.
Yeah. And Prukalpa, from a data quality, data governance perspective, how does generative AI change the conversation?
Yeah, I think it's very early, but a few patterns we're seeing. I think across all our customers, we're seeing this pattern of people deploying small language models, right? More than which is where RAGs, fine-tuning, some of this comes in. That's one pattern we're seeing. And as they look at that, I think the two nuances outside of just normal data quality, which is anything that we're seeing, is one, the importance of business terms and semantic context. So for example, we had a customer who's an investment firm, and he was like, when someone searches in our, someone chats saying TAM in our company, TAM means total addressable market, not the eight things that it means on the internet. So one layer is just how do you, if you get an accurate output, what is the semantic context that's core to the company, and how do we feed that in there? And that's one layer that's becoming very important, or more important than before. The second is we're seeing around, this is a little bit more around governance, but also relates a little bit of trust, which is how do I, depending on who's writing a question, what data actually goes into the answer. So for example, if I'm deploying something for my HR team, it's probably okay if payroll data gets used in the answer. It's probably not okay if it is across the rest of the company. I buy data from LinkedIn which has certain terms and conditions associated with it. I can only use it for this purpose, not this purpose. And so as you build that scale democratization, the way I think about this, you alluded to this, right? Which is the goalpost keeps changing. Actually, I think that's a good thing. The reason the goalpost is changing is because people are using data more. And the more people use data, the more they need to trust it, the more there are issues. It's actually a good goalpost. And so if you actually play this out, there's more and more people who are going to maybe the dream of like truly democratized data where everybody actually uses data daily and like, that's going to play out. But then how do you feed it with the right people should only get the right context at the right time in a way that's safe and secure? Like, how do you solve for that? Those problems are proliferating and now need to be done in a very different way than before.
I think those problems of permissions are easier than you're getting at, Prukalpa. The reason people think these problems are hard is because they look at the people who make the base models, like OpenAI and Anthropic and Mistral and all of them. And they're doing like web scraping. So they have a whole data pipeline that's like a scraping pipeline that is designed on the assumption that it is public data. And so everything has the same permissions domain. But a business that's using its internal data in an AI application is not like that at all. They have data with very complex permissions landscapes, but that's very normal in a like business intelligence scenario. The way you solve this is by using the same data infrastructure that you use for everything else for AI. I have disappointing news. A relational database is the right answer as the data platform for your AI workload as well, because yes, there is some unstructured data in there. Relational databases have text columns. They've had them for a long time. They work great. But there's also going to be a forest of other tables that tell you all of the permissions, metadata that you need to know in order to manage this problem. So I think, if your starting point is like a web scraping pipeline that looks like what the people who train the base models are using, yes, the permissions problem look very hard. But if your starting point is a relational database that is structured similarly to the one you use for BI, this is the whole problem. You need to join to all the appropriate things and recapitulate the permissions rules of the systems of record in the SQL queries, and you're ready to go. It's not that it's like so easy you're going to do it in a day, but my point is it's not really new. This idea of I have a database, I have a bunch of data in it, there are rules about who is allowed to see what, like that. If you have a complete schema of the system that you're talking about, that is a very solvable problem using traditional techniques.
And is that solved through Sorry, but for me, the question is that solved through something like RAG? But Prukalpa, I'll let you answer your question.
So I think I don't think my call is for like what's the new technology we need. I actually think that I think we actually spoke about this maybe like 9 months ago on maybe a different panel, like, and we were like, maybe the technology, the data and AI, it's likely going to look pretty similar to what I don't think it's a technology layer. I do think the nuance is solving the problem. Like, it does introduce a lot of new nuances around, like, just because you're processing this at a speed and at a scale and at like there's actually nuances to this which need to be solved for if we really move towards that AI world. And then second, there's also a human collaboration problem, which is what is the policy? It's not even a technology problem. It's like, how do we collaborate to figure out what the right policies are for what the right use cases are? And that used to happen on like people. Like, I've seen so many examples of people doing this. Like, there's documents written and like published somewhere, nobody ever uses them, and it was okay because it was like a few dashboards here and there, which is just not going to be okay in the future. So how do you solve for that? I think that's why it becomes more important.
Okay, that's awesome. So we do have a couple of minutes left. I want to make sure that we answer some audience Q&A. There's one that I think we're going to be only able to answer one, but I think it's going to be very relevant, which is, how do you proceed with management to make them understand the cost of data quality issues? Because we've been talking about putting a metric on it. We've been talking about, aligning the organization. I think no metric is better than ROI or lack thereof. So maybe, how are you able to kind of put a cost on data quality issues? So Prukalpa, I'll start with you.
I feel like Barr might have a better answer to this one, but because I know you have a framework that you put out at some point. But I think the high level here first is almost accepting that everything in data across cannot directly be measured to business value, because data itself is a support function inside an org. It's like BizOps and management, things like that. So like, if an analyst produced a report with, say, like our CEO talks about this, like he was like, I was hiring a bunch of sales reps in my team. Same time, like I hired one analyst who found this one thing that we could optimize, and we actually like made an extra $1 million through that one analyst. What's the ROI of that analyst time? It's way more than 10 sales reps. So how do you think about it? It's just harder to do because it's 2 layers removed, because data needs to drive strategy or execution. Both of those things together drive business ROI. And it's just hard to decouple. So that's true for any data platform tooling across. And I think first, just accepting that, I think, is helpful. And then second, then, okay, then what are those? So if you can't get to the outcome metric, what's the output metric that you can get to? Is the way I think about it. So we do need a North Star that we can progress towards, because you know that this is important to get to the outcome. And, you know, if you're in a company that you need to convince people on that, then I would question whether like data is actually really important to the company. Because like that's pretty straightforward. Like, you know, you should have good data to drive, but like if you're convincing people on that, like I think the first question to really have with whoever is asking you for a business case is this really important for you? Because if it's not, like then that's okay. Let's have a conversation about it. And then I think what's the output metric, and I'll let Barr talk about that because I know you.
Yeah, I'll let Barr end with us on the framework.
Sure. So the number one thing, it depends on, I'll say it depends on who you're talking to. If you talk to executives, the number one thing they'll tell you is, I just sleep better at night, knowing that someone sort of that the data that's powering my business, you know, whatever it is, data products, dashboard, generative AI, call it whatever you like. I just sleep better at night knowing that the data is accurate, which is very hard to measure, to Prukalpa's point. If you talk to a data engineer, machine learning engineer, whatever it is, they oftentimes will talk about how much time they spend. And are they spending on sort of cleaning up data or cleaning up, you know, fire drills? And, you know, or actually are they sort of, you know, building new pipelines and doing things, doing other things? So that's, you know, kind of like various answers that you will get. I will say in general, there's sort of 3 things that we think about. The first is reputation and brand and trust. So when your data is wrong, again, like, you know, think about the Google example. I don't know if I'll trust another Google search again after I saw the superglue example. The second is cost of revenue. And so oftentimes, you know, I gave the airline example, but there's real implications. You know, one data issue can easily cost millions of dollars for an organization. And then the third metric that, you know, I mentioned is sort of team efficiency or team time, your organizational time on that. Those are sort of the 3 high-level metrics.
Okay, that is awesome. And I think this is a great time to end today's panel, to end day 1 of Radar. I want to say a huge thank you for Prukalpa, Barr, George for joining us for such an insightful session. I truly, truly appreciate it. Everyone show them the love with the emojis below. And I also say a huge thank you for everyone who's joining from across the world, you know, people joining us from different time zones, people even at like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. watching this stuff. I really, really appreciate it. So I want to say a huge, huge thank you to all panelists today and to our speakers and to our audience. And in the meantime, do check out the LinkedIn group, keep connecting, and see you tomorrow, same time, same place. I really appreciate it, everyone. Speak soon.
Thank you.